Welcome to the M&A Unplugged podcast. Our mission is to help you be better prepared for your business acquisition or sale. Being prepared will ensure you maximize returns and minimize risks. This is M&A Unplugged with your host, Domenic Rinaldi.
Welcome back. I'm Domenic Rinaldi, the host of the M&A Unplugged podcast. Matot is a fourth-generation dumbwaiter manufacturer. The president, Jim Piper, is a former guest on the M&A Unplugged podcast. Our firm, Sun Acquisitions, helped them complete a strategic acquisition several years ago. By all measures, Matot's acquisition is a tremendous success story. Moving the target company into their facility, integrating employees to create one company, they retain the entire employee base, and they've grown the target company revenues year over year. On this episode, Jim joins us again to talk about the integration of the acquired company, what went right, what could have been done better, and some best practices to consider when planning for your own acquisition. Listen to this episode, and I promise you'll be better prepared for the critical task of integration. If you want to avoid common deal pitfalls, the risk of losing substantial dollars, you need to know how ready you are for a transaction. Because I believe proper preparation is so critical to your deal success, I have decided to open enrollment in my coaching group for applicants who are interested in improving their knowledge and skills on how to buy or sell a business. I am limiting enrollment, so contact us as soon as possible if you are interested. You can do that by sending an email to info@k2advisor.com and request info on our coaching opportunity. Being prepared is critical to ensuring that you maximize returns and minimize risks. Thank you for being here and hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hey, Jim, welcome back to M&A Unplugged.
Hey, Dominic, good to see you again.
Hey, good to see you. Thanks for coming back. I think if I go back, I didn't look, but I think you were interview number 2 or 3 on
That's amazing.
M&A Unplugged.
Yeah, how many are we at now?
You'll probably be close to 70 something, 75 maybe by the time we drop this.
Well, congratulations.
Well, thank you. And thank you for being a part of the journey. And for folks that didn't listen to your episode, we helped you acquire a business, Matot, acquire business strategic acquisition. And so I really wanted to bring you back to talk about integration because I think you did such a nice job of, integrating a company into your facility. And I think it'd be great for people to hear that story. But if you wouldn't mind, though, before we get into that, give people a background on Matot and how you and the executives of Matot decided that an acquisition was the right thing to do.
Sure. And again, thanks for having me back. Matot is a company with a very interesting history. We're a manufacturer of commercial dumbwaiters, and we've been in this business for 130 years plus now. The company was started in 1888. Has always been Chicago-based. Fourth generation ownership, and 2 sisters own the company today. So we're a woman-owned business. A few years back, we looked at some strategic planning and growth goals and tried to make some decisions as to whether or not organic growth was where we should put our emphasis or if we should make a larger leap and look at acquisitions. We looked within the industry sector in which we typically play, which is the elevator industry first. And then we also looked for compatible businesses that could leverage our skill sets as a custom engineered kind of sheet metal manufacturing company. Within the industry, we looked upstream and downstream and really couldn't identify a good fit at the time. So we approached you to help us with that initial search for an acquisition target. And, through a variety of different industries and owner meetings and product types, we settled on our ultimate acquisition, which was a industrial damper company. Nothing at all to do with the dumbwaiter world in which we play today, but very compatible in terms of it was also a custom engineered metal fabricated product. So leveraged both the same type of engineering skill sets that we had in-house, but also, and probably more importantly, leveraged our skill set on our manufacturing floor where we had excess capacity at the time.
Yeah. And so when you went out to do this acquisition, you knew that you most likely wanted to merge something into your existing operation. You had the capacity on the floor. And so you were really targeting businesses that would be easy to fold in to your existing operation.
Yeah, that's right. We had identified probably 25% of our floor space could be freed up for, depending on the type of product we're going to add. We have a 40,000 square foot facility today, and in the ideal case, we were hoping to find a product that would utilize, the majority of the same equipment and techniques that we use on the shop floor.
Yeah, and I think it's such a great example. When we have people come to us and they're interested in making acquisitions, I'd say, the preponderance of the time they're coming and they're looking to maybe acquire competitors, and we try to expand that thinking and
Sure.
the net to think about, well, are there strategic acquisitions that you could be making that, isn't your core business, but it's additive, or like you did, it's similar process. So, you could easily fit that into what you were doing because you had the core skill set, even though it's a completely different industry. And I think it's a great example of being strategic about an acquisition.
Yeah, and for us, it's had a lot of added benefits because it's really diversified our revenue stream. The dumbwaiter side of the business that which is still responsible for 2/3 of our business, is a very commercial product. It's going into new buildings, it's going into new construction, it's going into restaurants, hotels, hospitals, airports. The business that we acquired is a heavy industrial product. The sales channels are different. The way it goes to market is very different. It's sold to independent industrial sales reps. So over the course of, since we've acquired it, and even now through the pandemic period, we'll call it, it's certainly helped level load our revenue streams and sort of our production modeling too over the course of time. And I don't think that necessarily would have been the case if we had identified something strictly within our industry.
Yeah. Diversification is a great thing.
Right.
Especially when we've been in the industry for 130 years.
Right. Took us a while to diversify, but now we're there, right? Now it's working.
So let's dive into integration a bit. It's a topic I've been talking a lot about lately because I think it's such an important one, whether you're a group of investors acquiring a business that you're going to operate yourselves, or your company looking to acquire another company. Integration is so critical. And I really think you guys did such a nice job of planning it and then executing it. And I know it didn't go completely as you had planned, but because you had a plan, you were able to modify it on the dime. And so why don't we talk with, when did you first start to build the integration plan, and what did that look like? And then we can get into, the actual implementation of it.
Sure. I think we started to build, once we had identified that we were fairly certain we were going to close this deal, it was probably a good 30 days out that we really started to finalize and add detail to an integration plan. Once we knew the product, we had a feel for the company size, the number of employees, the manufacturing processes. So I would guess about 30 days out, we really started to add detail. And I think a lot of it comes down to, and I may have read this somewhere else, it's capacities and capabilities, right? Is really, when we look down the line items of things that need to be accomplished in any transaction, any M&A transaction, from the early stages of identifying targets to evaluating acquisitions to doing due diligence, all the way through integration, it's really merging the capacities that you have on hand, and that's typically the personnel, with the capabilities that they have. And so it's this matrix of skill sets to identify who's going to be responsible for what levels of detail. Do we have the right team members in place? And again, do they have the tools and skills to get the jobs done? So once we sort of mapped out our internal, I'll call it the HR skill set, we went through a very logical and not unheard of plan of what the integration was going to look like, from the financial aspect of it to the legal side of it, to the HR. But My background and strength and passion is in the operational side of the business. So with our engineering team, with our production team, sort of pre-formal announcement, we began to map out literally week to week the actions we were going to take as a company to integrate production into our systems. This is an ideal case on paper. It never works out 100% to plan, of course, but it really helps to flesh out all of the detailed questions, all the way down to literally the nuts, bolts, and washers of the operation, right? So here, now we have two companies, two different physical locations that, for example, require the same raw materials. Mm-hmm. How is that transaction going to occur once it's under one umbrella? So yeah, looking back upon it, about 30 days out, once we knew we were 95% of the way to close and getting a deal done, and it was just legalese at the time, we really started to add a lot of detail to our integration plan.
And Jim, did you find that you had all of the proper resources internally, or did you have to bring in any external resources to help?
Operationally, we handled it like any other traditional M&A transaction. We leaned heavily upon banks, lenders, and legal, and yourself for contractual assistance. There's no way we could have gotten the deal done without that team in the background supporting us. Operationally, we were fortunate enough to have the skills in-house to get the manufacturing part of the integration up and running and eventually transitioned without any external help.
That's tremendous. Had anybody gone through a merger or an acquisition before on the team that you had assembled for integration?
Not at the scale, no.
Yeah.
It was really the first time to do such a formal transaction. They had done a very small acquisition of a competitor in the mid-90s, mm-hmm. another dumbwaiter company. So there's sort of two main players. There's kind of a Coke and Pepsi in Chicago. That company was merged into Matot in the mid-90s. And the gentleman that owned and ran that company actually became an employee of Matot. But beyond that, they'd never accomplished a strategic acquisition as the one we just did.
So I'm curious, looking back now, integration's hard, right? I mean, it's not just the manufacturing processes, right? It's HR, right. It's all the financial components. It's, it touches every aspect, marketing, sales. Did the integration team, did they have the capability to handle the integration on top of their day jobs? Or did you find that there were some stressors in heaping the integration on top of, their day jobs?
In the moment, it seemed like we could handle it, but looking back upon it, we certainly overwhelmed our team.
You did.
I'll say that. And specifically to one of the points you mentioned, sales was one where it was extremely taxing. One day our sales team is selling and has a great depth of knowledge of one entire product and way to go to market with our main product line, this dumbwaiter line. And the next day, we're also asking them to sell this brand new thing that they've never heard of. Mm-hmm. That was probably the most time-consuming part of the transition for our team, was with bringing the sales team up to speed about this new product. And we greatly underestimated the 20 years of experience that the prior owner had selling the product, right? Mm. He was sort of, I'd say raised in the business. He was not only the owner, but he was the primary salesperson. Had the customer relationships, had the relationships with our rep groups that were deep, and bridging that gap between his knowledge base, his experience, and building that with our sales team, in addition to them doing their day before, day to day, was extremely taxing. And likely someplace where if we had to do it again, it may have made sense to hire almost someone new in our sales organization to solely handle and learn this new product line.
Understood. And you had the benefit of the previous owner stuck around for a while, right?
Yes.
He was there for 3 to 6 months, right? So you had the benefit of a pretty orderly transition.
We did. In fact, we kept him as a consultant for nearly 2 years.
Oh,
Almost as a full-time employee for the first year, and then as a 25%er for the second year. So we did have him around for an extended period of time, which is extremely beneficial and fortunate in our case, because I know that's not always the scenario.
and did he continue to do the sales until you could calm things down on the sales side?
Yes, so he helped immediately with that transition. So he was still taking sales calls, still responding to sales emails as he was training both our kind of production operational team, but also our sales team.
So fast forward to today, are your salespeople all selling both the Matot product and the dampers? So do they have everything in their toolkit? They
do. So all of our internal sales team can sell both products.
Yeah.
They tend to specialize. We kind of shift the burden from one to the other, but overall, both teams can quote both products. The only difference with the new product line is we did hire a full-time outside sales manager for the new industrial product line because that's sold through independent sales reps. They sort of require a different hand-holding and management technique. But internally, yes, we train everybody on every product. Engineering goes the same way too. Our engineers can build and design both products, and our production team can, of course, manufacture both products.
Got it. Let's spend a minute talking about the people. I think you kept all but one or two of the employees from the damper business moved into Matot and moved in the facility. How did that go? In retrospect, looking back at it, are there things you would have done differently? Talk about the people integration and culture a little bit as well.
Sure. So I think this is definitely an area where we would have done things a little different next time, and I'll touch upon that. Going into the deal, it was very important to Matot that we offer every employee at the new facility, at the new company, a job. And we were very upfront about that going in. We had decided that as an executive management team, that was our goal. We wanted to retain everybody. And day one, we made that offer. You're now a Matot employee. We need you. We know nothing about this business. We're going to need your help. Welcome to the team. At the home office, we also were very transparent about the work that we were doing. Again, once we knew the deal was going to happen with our home team, to say, hey, Matot's growing strategically. We just bought a company. Congratulations. We've just grown our revenue by a third. But there are going to be some changes. And again, we kind of mapped out the integration plan to our home team so that everyone here, again, from office to production staff, is very aware of the changes that were going to happen, how people were going to be taxed and kind of pulled in different directions for a period of time, but overall explain clearly why this was good for the company as a whole. The mistake we made, looking back upon the announcement to the company that we acquired, was, if you can imagine this, the day of, we had planned thoroughly about the words we were going to say. We had brought food in, but the employees at the acquired company had no idea that this was going to happen. Mm-hmm. And so they were pulled into a small break room with the owner, and myself and our executive management team were there. So you can imagine the nerves that were on edge when something like that happens. Mm. And I think that the error we made was not working with the owner as to how best to message what had just happened. Mm. And so rather than, and again, through no fault of his own, rather than perhaps taking an approach that said, hey, I really just want to thank everybody for the decades of service that you've given to me and my company. I've decided to make some personal changes in my life. And one of those is I've decided to sell the company. Let me introduce you to the new owners and kind of explain how this whole process was going to work. In reality, the words that came out of his mouth was, we've just been acquired. Mm. And let the pin drop, right? Mm. And so it made it seem as if we were some nefarious group that had come in under the cover of darkness to acquire this company, almost against his best wishes and interests for the company. And with that tone, we immediately had grown men crying who thought that their jobs were going to be lost. The sky was falling. It was just a shock to the system in the way that the presentation went down. So we were, our messaging amongst our team was very clear, and we had agreed that, we knew what we were going to do and say when we went in the door, but we did not anticipate all the messaging that came out of the current owner's mouth. So there was a lot of, picking up the pieces after those words were said, which again seems very simple in hindsight, but in the moment it was just detrimental to the entire morale of the team that we,
Wow.
had hoped to maintain employment with. So obviously a lot of questions about employment, and then it got down to the nitty gritty about insurance and bonuses and vacation and holiday pay. All those questions were fired at us. And we were able to soothe a lot of that. But again, partnering with the acquired company ownership or management team ahead of time to discuss messaging is something that we certainly would have liked to have spent more time looking at.
Yeah, it's such an important point. Most acquirers will come in, or the previous owner will come in, and they're thinking about what's happened for them or what's about to happen.
Right.
And it's so important to put yourself in the chair of the employees that are sitting there,
Right.
who have now, their world is getting turned upside down. And I just did an interview with Dr. Clint Kendrick. He's an HR M&A expert. And one of the things he said in best practice that he delivers to people is, look, start with the fact that they have jobs. If they do, in fact, have jobs, let them know they have jobs,
right?
That they're going to be valued members of the team. And then you can work through, this is your great strategic, you can get to everything else, but start with them.
Yeah, I think it's imperative to maintain
and work your way back. You've got their attention. You've taken the burden off their shoulders.
Right. It's imperative to maintain, what we call the employee infrastructure, right? Because you need to maintain that morale. You've got to maintain that employee buy-in. And a lot of that for us in this case, again, because it was a very new industry for us, is that we didn't want to lose anybody that panicked and, skipped town, because there were a tremendous amount of, I'll call them in air quotes, secrets that the employees had for building the best quality product that the company had been known for.
Yeah.
And had we had a flight of employees, we really would have been up a creek trying to get things up and running. So again, we were able to pick up the pieces. We were able to, kind of bring everybody around. We were able to lay out, we had incentive plans to maintain employees. Again, we were eventually going to relocate employees. We consolidated operations 45 minutes away from their facility. And again, through a different variety of measures and incentives, we were able to maintain employment for almost all of the employees that were in the acquired company.
Did they know that day one, Jim? Did they know that eventually the operations would get merged, or did you start with, we just need to get to know each other, and then that decision was made and communicated later?
We let them know out of the gate, and it was an honest statement that we didn't know exactly what the timing was going to be and whether or not we were going to consolidate. However, we did leave it as an option.
Yeah.
This is where a pivot happened, because when we looked at our sort of detailed plan, we thought it would take us at least a year before we consolidated operations under one roof.
Yeah.
And we let them know that, like, hey, there's a possibility that one day you'll be working here in a new facility. We don't know when that's going to happen. We think it might take a year if it happens. However, operationally, we found it extremely inefficient to have both of these facilities running at the same time. We just didn't have enough people infrastructure to spread them geographically, and we weren't as familiar with things like Zoom at the time to really make it happen. And it was a lot of driving, it was a lot of windshield time, and when it came to combining even IT systems and ERP systems, it was very difficult to maintain the two systems. So rather than stick it out for a year, 4 months in, we consolidated operations. At that point, again, we were very transparent about our intentions and motivations for doing so. And it was at that point that we had individual meetings with each employee to discuss, their future with the company. Again, every employee was offered a job.
Right.
The production team was offered the exact same job that they had. There were some clerical jobs where we wanted to maintain the team members, perhaps not in the exact capacity that they were working today. And those are the one or two scenarios where it just didn't work out.
Yeah.
But for the most part, we were able to maintain every key employee that we needed to keep.
Jim, how did the integration, the physical integration, moving people into your facility work? Just the physical components of it, and then culturally, how did you merge these two different workforces? How did you make sure that it all came together so that there weren't, clashes, or were they separate enough that you didn't have to worry about that?
Several things we did. Early on, we brought all of the employees from the damper company to the dumbwaiter company via bus for a luncheon to meet us, to spend time and literally days with our home team, I'll call it. We did the same with our home team employees. We took them to the facility of the damper company and let them sit and shadow and meet and spend time with the new team. That helped. Just kind of start to build relationships, to put faces with names, to build rapport, to learn a little bit about the product mix. When it came to the physical move, it was really kudos and hats off to my engineering manager at the time, who had a vision for how to integrate this into our production facility and could kind of see down the path of what was going to be required in terms of infrastructure, free up the space in our current facility. And then, it took us maybe 4 days to move all of the physical goods that we were going to keep from the damper company to the dumbwaiter company. And a tremendous amount of planning. And then eventually it's just flatbeds and rigging companies and moving equipment. Once they were on site and once they were working here full time, we emphasized again and again and again that all of our employees are Matot employees. And that was done through luncheons, through swag. Everybody got shirts and hats and, water bottles, but everything was geared around one company, not two separate divisions under one roof. And we've continued to build that. And I can't say that out of the gate, it was the easiest and smoothest transition. That'd be a lie to say that there wasn't suspicion. Right? Yeah. And that there are different ways of doing business and there are different ways of manufacturing products that just presented obstacles that we had to overcome. But like anything, I think, we maintained the message that, we're one company. And ultimately, both product lines rely upon, many different employees building products for both. That's kind of what I wanted to say. So a lot of the raw materials get fed through the same work cells. Yeah. And so, we worked on cross training of our employees so they can build both product lines. And, eventually over time, there's kind of a symbiosis of skill sets and knowledges that ultimately led to the team that we have today. Now, we did eventually, some employees from both sides of the business have left since then, not as a direct result of the transition, but, we've been able to replace people now and maintain operations for both product lines because of this kind of cross-training nature of, all companies, all employees, one company kind of motto. And it's led us to, a fair amount of success so far.
That's great. So if you had to ramp up on one side of the business, you have employees on the other side that could come over and help with that.
That happens every week. Every week that happens. We transition employees from one, kind of work cell department to the other. Yeah. Fairly easily.
Yeah.
Yep.
So are there other things that happened in the integration that you think would be very helpful for other people to hear and understand?
I think one of the best things that happened to us in the integration, and actually just going through the entire M&A process, was that it really forced us as a kind of legacy company to update many of our tried and true processes and systems in ways that we wouldn't have been motivated to do so before. And I can give the simple example of an ERP system, which I know is kind of, makes people roll their eyes when they think about implementing one. But, we had a system that was designed to manufacture one product and had zero flexibility in terms of kind of, going to market differently, dealing with reps and commissions. And even our engineering systems were built for one system, didn't have any flexibility. And through the process of having to integrate an entirely different and new product line, it really forced an upgrade of much of our infrastructure, both personnel-wise. We're hiring, I would say, and this gives us the option to recruit better because of our kind of product mix and marketplace mix. It's a better story to tell. We've got a growth story now. We've had a success story through acquisition. We want to do this again, where we're going to continue to do this type of growth. So that's helped on a recruiting front, but also just a lot of the base, again, legacy historical systems that were in place from IT and ERP and finance. Those systems were all pulled and upgraded, over perhaps that first year. To now we're a modern company, right? We feel like we can do a continuous process of acquisitions. We're not afraid anymore to do new things, right? It's given us just a different perspective and outlook on as to who we are and the risk rewards that we can take now, because we're not stuck down this one single product line sort of mindset. So, I guess overall, looking back on it, that forced change, overall has been extremely beneficial
into your core business, unintended benefit.
For sure, absolutely. I mean, we're a much better company overall, not just because we grew revenue, but we're a much better company overall because we've done acquisitions.
That's tremendous.
Right.
Wow, that's great to hear. Jim, you've been very gracious with your time and the information. Let me sort of ask you an umbrella question. If you were to give people advice out there, top 3 things to do when you're looking at making an acquisition, what are the top 3 things that you would advise? And if it's 4 or 5, that's fine. But what are the top things you would recommend that somebody do when they're looking to make an acquisition?
I think it's important to have back of the house help in place long before you begin your search. And by that, I mean your accounting, your legal, your business broker or consultant, having those kind of the areas of expertise need to be well established, obviously long before you begin this process. Those are relationships that I hadn't spent much time with prior to the acquisition, and I'm very glad that I have those relationships now. Obviously, they were key to getting the job done, but just building and strengthening those relationships has been extremely helpful, both to the business, but also, personally. So sort of back of the house work, kind of back to my first statement, ensuring that you have the capacity and capabilities in-house to get the work done. Identifying the key personnel in your own organization and perhaps looking ahead to the acquired company or merged company, what key personnel are going to be part of the integration plan and how detailed of a plan can you put together, knowing what you have to work with. Yeah. Because again, to your point, you may need a consultant for some part of the process if the industry is that unfamiliar to you. Yeah. Third is, and again, it's said and it's very cliched, but it's just transparency when it comes to communication. Internally, we kept things, kind of tight and under wraps as we were working through this because we weren't too sure exactly what was going to happen. If the deal was going to get done, we were looking at multiple deals. But once it was done, it was open and you could ask me any question about it. Any employee could, about our motivations, our intentions, and how we expected things to go down. So those would be the 3 biggest things that I have to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think that's tremendous advice. I think you're spot on. And I think I know I've gotten to know you, and I know that from a communications perspective, you're transparent. You're not going to hold anything back. And I think that's such a key component of making sure that you retain those employees and win their hearts and minds. So,
right.
And this transaction I know has worked out very well for Matot, and you were a big piece in driving that success. So, kudos to you and the organization.
Yeah, thank you. And the other thing is you just can't stop learning, right? There's just so many different facets to this type of transaction. And there's, again, podcasts like this and different books and people that you meet that are in the industry. I mean, every time you listen to something like this or you meet another person in the industry, you're picking up another little tidbit of knowledge. So I think again, for me, for someone that hadn't done much of this work in the past, just the networking and asking questions, even post acquisition has been, extremely helpful.
Yeah, and I think you said it best. Assemble the right team. I mean, I've been doing this for a couple of decades, and I don't come across much that I haven't seen before. But every now and then, I'll come across something.
I bet.
And if you do 1 or 2 transactions, there's so much to know about getting an M&A transaction done. So we say this all the time. Get an M&A attorney, get an M&A accountant, get an M&A advisor, get the right team in place. You'll be well served. You'll save yourself a ton of money and heartache if you don't. And you'll meet your return, hopefully meet your return objectives, your return on investment objectives.
Yeah, much faster, I would hope.
Much faster. Hopefully.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Jim, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Continued success to you and Matot, and I'll look forward to hearing about the next acquisition.
Thanks again, Dominic. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, take care. I hope you enjoyed this episode. All of today's information will be available in the show notes. If you enjoy our content, please remember to subscribe and review our podcast. I look forward to seeing you again on the next episode of the M&A Unplugged podcast. And until then, please remember that scaling, acquiring, or selling a business takes time, preparation, and the proper knowledge.